People are masters at what ifs. There's many people that are like, what if I can't afford the rent? Or what if I can't afford my mortgage? And what if I'm out on the street? And what if I die? And you can follow that what if cycle, 5 layers deep and keep on going there. With the advent of AI, and this is one negative thing that has come out of it, is a lot of people don't go into deeper critical thinking anymore. As soon as you hit a bit of a roadblock, I notice I have teenage daughters and they use some tools, ChatGPT and things for school. And I notice every time they get stuck on a problem or something that's, they're doing some homework, first thing they do, jump on ChatGPT and ask that.
Welcome to the DevReady podcast. Joining me on the DevReady podcast today, I have Melo Calarco. Melo, thanks for taking the time out of your morning.
Thank you. Great to meet you and excited about this conversation.
I am too. For those of you that are new to the podcast or don't know how I run this, I've never actually met Melo before. We've had a quick 2-second chat before the podcast just to get him up to speed. But I'll let you introduce yourself because there's no way I can do a good job on that.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Melo, of course. Sometimes people call me Melo by name, Melo by nature. I'm a mindfulness facilitator, mindset coach, high performance coach, public speaker. So I do a lot of workshops and trainings around burnout and balance and resilience and high performance. So basically really helping people and companies thrive at their best without burning out. That's the work that I do and I absolutely love it. I published this book 2 years ago, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance, which is, I'm proud to say, just won its 5th award. So it's
congratulations.
Heading around the world. So yeah, I'm on a mission to help as many people as possible to perform at their best without compromising their well-being.
Yeah. So what got you into that space? Because that's always going to be an interesting story, I think, especially when you're in balance and burnout.
Yeah, probably a long evolution of my work, but an interesting question. So I've always just helped people in the work that I do. So I've always been some sort of coach, whether that was in another lifetime, physical therapies. I've worked in as an exercise physiologist, helping people, with injuries, physical injuries. And I very quickly realized when I was doing that type of work that a lot of the people that were attracted to me and coming to me for help and support, it wasn't really only physical. A lot of it was mental work. So I followed my heart and followed my passion, and then I designed some programs to work in psychiatric clinics. So I started working in mental health clinics, and we're helping people in there for about 20 years. And so then while I was working in the clinics, I was quite saddened about the state of people, suffering depression, anxiety, overwhelm. And many of these were high performers also. Many of these were corporate CEOs, athletes, celebrities even that I was working with. So then I continued to follow my passion and mission, and then I designed some programs to work in the corporate space to prevent people coming to the mental health clinic to start with. And I've been doing that again for the last 25 years, so alongside while I was doing the other work. And it just keeps evolving as I go and keep helping as many people as possible. I work with a whole range of different industries, from CEOs, executives, to high-performing athletes, including Olympic athletes, to people suffering mental health, to a whole range of different people, doctors, surgeons, and across all industries. You name it, I work in it, basically.
Well, everyone's affected by that, and there is, I think it's probably an increasing thing in society at the moment where there's more pressure, more burnout on everyone, and then there's a lot of unknowns at the moment as well, as we've seen in the past 2 weeks, just in Australia with not knowing what's going to happen. There's concerns about a fuel run out and all this other stuff, and there's probably a lot of pressure being added to people.
Totally. And actually the last workshops that I have been doing over the last couple of months have been all about that, navigating uncertainty, navigating overwhelm. So with uncertainty comes anxiety, comes fear and all those range of emotions. And then, people are suffering and people are struggling. So I use tools of mindfulness, and I use a whole range of different techniques to help people to stay present with what is happening instead of getting caught up in all the what ifs. So, we're always living in a time of change. There's always new things happening, but I think now it's really exemplified.
Very little I know about the psychology of the space, but it's more you got to have to think about what you can control rather than what you can't. Because all the things you can't control, if one of them does eventuate, you've thought about it twice, once before and then after you're dwelling on it again, probably.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So very often I work on that sort of space there, where focus on the things you can control and actually hyper focus on that, because anything that's out of that circle of control is going to create anxiety, it's going to create fear, it's going to create the unknown. So there's no point spending a single neuron of activity there. So when it comes to mindfulness, we really focus on what is happening because we can always cope with what is. And I didn't mention before, but as part of my development and my personal development, I cycled around the world on my mountain bike.
Oh,
So
wow.
I traveled around the whole planet. Took me about 2.5 years, and I got in all sorts of situations on that trip. And you name it,
I
like
can imagine.
machine guns in my ribs in Rwanda, knives to my throat, caught malaria in Africa, crazy situations up in the Himalaya and India. And if I was to set out on that trip and actually think about all the what ifs that would happen, I never would go. I never would have gone. So what I did focus on is what is happening in the moment. Really immersing myself in the cultures and the different places I was in. And I always knew that I had the resources inside of me to cope with what is happening.
Hmm.
Because if I focused on the what ifs, I never would have left. I never would have gone. So
Yeah.
just having that trust and developing that trust within yourself. So that's what I work with, advising people to focus on what you can control and believe that you always have the resources to go through hard times. You never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice.
Yeah. And you see sort of those what ifs become sort of the foundation of that anxiety. And then if you dwell on them too much, that becomes sort of like that crippling anxiety, which you wouldn't have never pedaled the bike if you just focused there solely.
Totally, totally. And people are masters at what ifs. There's many people that are like, oh, what if this happens? What if that? What if I can't afford the rent? Or what if I can't afford my mortgage? And what if I'm out on the street? And what if I die? And you can follow that what if cycle, 5 layers deep and keep on going there. I often say, like, if I ask the question to your listeners to think about, is it possible to feel anxious and be fully present at the same time? Like, is it possible to feel anxious if you're fully present with what you're doing? Chances are no, because very often anxiety, not always, anxiety is complex, but very often anxiety is about a future thing that hasn't even happened yet. And we start catastrophizing about it. We start thinking about it. Now we've got, rising petrol costs and wars happening in the Middle East and a whole range of different things going on. And if we start focusing on that, it's going to cause anxiety and fear. So, just focusing on what is happening in real time, and we can always cope with that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a bit hard with how much noise there is coming out of the news or negativeness about just this week in Australia. Everyone's worried about, are we going to run out of fuel? There is reserves in that countries have for situations like this, but the petrol hasn't stopped. It's just been I think it's 2% or something of the world's supply is held up. Not the 20 or 30 or 40%. I'm just not sure. Yeah, there's a lot of like fear mongering that happens because that's sensationalism that comes out of news, and then that's what people get hooked on.
Exactly, that's exactly right. That's it. It's the sensationalism. The news has to sell articles, so they're always on to the next thing. Whatever Trump's doing, or whatever the stock market's doing, or the petrol prices, and all those things that are happening. But just in general, anyway, even like what's happening currently in the world right now. But in general, we are bombarded by so much external stimuli. There's just so much information. I read something recently that says that we take in more information in one single day here today in the year 2026 than somebody in the 15th century would take in the whole course of a year.
That's
And
surprised.
it's crazy, and it's like the equivalent of reading 276 newspapers per day.
Oh, well. Okay.
We can't do that. We can't possibly take in all that information. I know
Yeah.
you're in the software world and the AI world and all that, and we are just constantly bombarded, constantly by external stimuli, by distractions, and that's why I hear the word very often, overwhelm. Overwhelm is, we're overstimulated, overwhelmed. I mentioned I work in psychiatric clinics, and I often ask the patients when they come to my program. I run, 4-week programs in there, and I say, how are you? How can I support you? What happened? And they will all say a version of, oh, it was just too much. I couldn't take it anymore. I was overwhelmed. So we're living in an overwhelming society, and we're taking in all this information. It's actually an information overload.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming, but I think, yeah, you have to learn how to manage it, which is,
That's right.
I'm sure, the tools and what you talk to people and how you get them through the process.
That's right, exactly. Because there's always the next shiny object. There's always the next thing that's coming through, the next AI tool, the next AI this that just keeps
Yeah.
coming, which is exciting. Like, don't get me wrong, I actually use some tools myself, and I think they're very useful. But it's like anything. Like, use them, don't let them consume you, and don't abuse them.
Yeah.
I always ask myself this question every day when I'm working, and I work for myself, and I run my own business, and I do a lot of speaking, and I travel all around the planet, actually around Australia and around the planet doing speaking, running workshops, designing workshops. But always when I'm working and I'm sitting behind my computer, I ask myself this question. I say, am I consuming or am I creating? Because if I'm not creating, I'm just consuming like material, listening to the new next shiny tool, and you can spend hours and hours and hours consuming information.
It's
Yeah,
never ending.
it's never ending, exactly. But don't get me wrong, consuming and learning is good. So I'll set aside some time. I'll say, okay, I'm going to watch that, that YouTube, or I'm going to watch that TED talk. I'm going to listen to that podcast. So then I am choosing to consume. I'm actually choosing to, block out an hour or something. But it's very easy to turn that hour into 2 hours, and you go down some rabbit hole. And before you know it, 4 hours of your day is gone consuming other people's information, and you're not creating yourself. So for me, the balance should be at least 80% creation, 20% consuming.
Yeah, you definitely need to spend more time doing and creating content or doing your actual work, not
That's
just
right.
no one's job is solely to learn.
I've been coaching this guy in New York lately at the moment, and it's been about 6 months now. I've been working with him. He's actually a lawyer. He's a Harvard lawyer. Really interesting guy, very smart guy. And every time I see him, I ask him, "Did you do your homework? Did you do what we talked about?" "Oh no, but have you seen this new tool that's come out? This new thing?" And he gets so excited about it. And 6 months passed, and he hasn't done anything. Like he's just like followed that. "Hey, have you checked out this new AI tool that you plug into LinkedIn and it spits out this?" It's like very interesting, but is it actually driving your business forward? Is it helping you achieve your goals? Probably not. So it's quite frustrating. We laugh about it. 6 months can pass and he hasn't done anything.
Yeah,
He's just
it's very difficult to put that into practice and probably understand that, especially like in my space, I'm in AI software development. If I don't keep up with AI and what's happening in the news, we'll fall behind. And that's probably what he feels like. But there's a difference in keeping up and understanding how to implement it and then actually implementing it as well. Like you do need to have that time. You said like that's the create and consume.
Yeah. Bingo. That's the word I want to hear is implement. Like we need to implement, we need to do things. It's the same as, practicing some of the things that I teach. I mean, if you wanted to run a marathon, let's say, and you wanted to get fit and strong and run a marathon, it doesn't help if you just read all the books on how to run a marathon or watch all the YouTube clips. It doesn't, you actually have to go out and do the training. You have to go out and do the work. It's the same as practicing meditation or mindfulness. You can read all the books you like, but unless you do the practice, it actually doesn't help you. There's another client that I work with. He's actually a professor, and he's a cardiovascular surgeon. Very smart guy, very, very intelligent guy. I started working with him, and it was actually his wife that called me because he was in the burnout zone. He was in full red burnout, absolutely exhausted, fatigued. And when I got the email from him and he said, "I'd love to work with you, Melo. Let's tee up the first session." And I looked at his initials on the signature of his email, and it was like Doctor this, with all these, like abbreviations after. Yeah, exactly. It was longer than his name. It was like PhD, blah, 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 masters in this. And I thought to myself, how am I going to help this guy? How am I going to actually coach this guy? He's far smarter than me. But it was very clear on the very first session that we did, because he was in the red zone, the very first session, I said to him, we should do this. He goes, "Melo, I wrote a book on that. Melo, I wrote papers on that. Melo, I've written 62 research papers on that subject." Yes, it's very clear that you know it, but you obviously aren't doing it and practicing it, because he was far red. Like I said, he was actually not sleeping.
And yeah, knowing the theory is one thing. Like I find I can understand as much as possible, but unless you start doing it, you don't know how it's going to work or what the implications of it are. And then the way I interpret things is once you start doing it, you start making other connections to things. So the more information you have or the more different domains you know information about, you can draw from different things and make new connections or understand how something should work for you or in that industry or whatever it may be. And I think that's probably what he's done. Yeah. I'm the expert in it, but he's not actually living it.
That's right, exactly. You have to do that first thing to get the momentum. And what we did was we basically reclaimed his 101 self-care practices, like absolutely making sure he's sleeping well, making sure he's eating well, making sure he's exercising. Because very often when we get stressed and we get busy and we get overwhelmed, we let go of those things that actually
Yep.
serve us the best. I'm too busy today. I can't be bothered going to the gym, or I haven't got time for a walk, or I'll just grab takeaway because I just can't even think about cooking, let alone cook. So what we did is we simply reclaimed those self-care habits,
Hmm.
and like you said, build that momentum. And then once we started building that momentum, we started adding other things. And now he's totally fine. There was actually an article in The Age about him, and also in different newspapers around Australia, and myself as his coach, and how we actually laughed about his knowledge that he had but wasn't doing it. So, and very often we're guilty of that. Yeah, we know it, we know what's good for us, but we
Yeah.
actually don't do it, and that's where burnout comes. So, just to define burnout, to say what it is, just to for your listeners also to understand, the WHO defined burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed.
Okay.
So this is, by the way, their 11th revision. They've revised it 11 times. They're not quite there. They're not quite there. I think when they say chronic workplace stress, it's not only workplace stress. It can be financial stress.
It's any stress, really.
Yeah, it can be family stress. It can be, health stress. It can be carer stress. It can be PTSD, a whole range of things. But the three criteria to diagnose burnout and what it is number one, that absolute sheer exhaustion. Where you just got nothing left in the tank. You can't even get out of bed, and it doesn't matter how much sleep you get, you can't function. Number two is that feeling of distance. You're a bit more distant and, fading off and drifting off and not really connected to your family and the people around you and your work, and probably a bit more cynical and negative than usual. So that's number two criteria. And number three is what they say is lack of professional efficacy. So those things that would normally be easy for you is hard, like everything. You get a little simple job to do. Oh my God, it's too much. It's overwhelming. So that's the three criteria, to diagnose burnout. And chances are, many of us feel some of those. When it's a prolonged period of time, then it becomes a bit dangerous in that red zone. So
Is that just the main thing? Is just that your mental fatigue is hit because you're just constantly thinking about things? That's why it's the unresolved stress, I guess.
yeah, there's different types of burnout. Obviously, there's pure physical burnout. Like I coach athletes, and
Hmm.
sometimes they get into like a physical burnout where they've just used the body too much and
Yep.
not restored and recovered. But usually, it's a combination of physical, mental,
Yep.
emotional burnout. So it could be emotional, for
Okay.
example. You could be in a relationship, and it's all consuming, and you're not happy, and it's not harmonious. So it could be that. But usually, it's a combination of those things: physical, mental,
Yep.
spiritual and emotional. And then it's about understanding. But usually what I see, it's an evolution of stress. So there's not all stress is equal. For example, we need stress to drive us, to motivate us, to help us achieve our goals. In fact,
Keep us alive.
yeah, to keep us alive, we need stress. If there's no stress, there's no performance.
Yep.
We need to perform at our best. We need a little bit of stress just to drive us to optimize our energy and our drive. But then it turns into chronic stress, and that starts feeling like, adrenaline and cortisol going through the body, can't sleep at night, overwhelmed, overstimulated, like we talked about before. And then the tipping point that I see is when it turns into what's called allostatic stress. I'm not
Hmm.
sure if you heard of that term, allostatic stress.
No, I haven't heard that one before.
So, allostatic stress or allostatic load is this constant compounding of stressors, like the next thing, the next thing. You just keep adding and adding and adding and not looking after yourself and starting to let go of your self care practices. And then it starts wearing us out. Because chronic stress, we can still function, we can still keep going, even though we're overstimulated. Chronic stress is more like too much, too much, too much.
Hmm.
Whereas allostatic stress is more like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I've got nothing left. I'm starting to get a bit fatigued now because it's starting to wear us out. The adrenaline and cortisol in the body is starting to tire us out. We're not sleeping at night. It's having a compounding effect. And then the end result is burnout. And when you're at burnout zone, you are no longer functional. You can't function at all. Like just a simple job you couldn't do. So it is this compounding. And very often, like when I did interview for the book, very often we don't notice it until it's too late. Very often until we're actually in the red zone, or we don't reach out or
Hmm.
don't do something about it until we're in that red zone. So the work that I do is I try to help people be self-aware, first of all, to
Yep.
realize, hey, I'm nudging into that sort of yellow zone, that amber zone. What do I need to do to get back to the green zone?
And a lot of that is then just without knowing the space and probably simplifying it too much. It's more just managing your thoughts, and then the tools to manage it in a
Well,
really simple way of
yeah,
explaining it.
that's part of it. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, and I also like to simplify it, like to simplify the complex. So thoughts are one thing. So very often when it comes to mental health, and especially mental health issues, it's often our thoughts that are overtaking us. So I like to share that you are not your thoughts. Like thoughts are just thoughts. That's all they are. Because if somebody comes up to me, especially in the mental health clinics, if somebody comes up to me and says, Melo, I'm anxious, or Melo, I'm depressed, or Melo, I'm scared, as soon as they say I am plus the thing,
Hmm.
I am anxious, I am scared, I am depressed, they are then identifying with their thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah, their thoughts have become their identity. I am anxious.
Hmm.
But thoughts are just thoughts. That's all they are. It's what energy you give that thought. Yeah, we have over up to 60,000 thoughts per day. Yeah, and of those, yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes even more, and especially in this overwhelming world, I'd say it's even nudging into hundreds of thousands of thoughts per day. But of those thoughts, 95% of those thoughts are the same ones you had yesterday and the day before and the day before. They're repetitive thoughts.
Okay.
And 80% of those thoughts are usually negative. So it actually takes more work to think positively than it does to think negatively. It's easier to think negatively. It's part of what we call a negative bias. We look at the world with a negative bias. We look at the world. It keeps us safe. Yeah, we're looking for danger. We're looking for fear.
Yeah, so yeah, it's probably part of the like fight or flight. It's more the protective, like the lizard brain part of us,
That's right. Exactly.
as they say.
Exactly. So 80% of our thoughts are negative, and usually the first thought of the day is a negative one. Oh, it's cold outside. I can't be
I don't
bothered
want to
to
get
get
up.
up. Yeah, I don't want to get up. I don't want to go to work. So it actually takes work and it takes awareness and mindfulness to actually turn towards your thoughts and to have a relationship with them and get an understanding and realize that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts, and
Hmm.
you become an observer of your thoughts. You start
Okay.
observing almost like a third party, and you
Yep.
start realizing, hey, yeah, every time I watch the news I get this fear or this thought, or every time I do this I get that. So you start recognizing your thoughts. So it is, in some ways it's turning towards your thoughts and not pushing them away. Very often people will distract themselves, so they're having an uncomfortable thought or they're not feeling good, or they're starting to affect their mental health, and they'll just do something else. They'll distract themselves with something else just to push that thought away.
Yep.
But my invitation is actually to lean into your thoughts, develop a relationship with them, get an understanding of them.
And yeah, so that's sort of like putting a light on it rather than being consumed by them all around you. You're on the outside looking in and understanding what's happening. And then on the emotional and spiritual side, I'm guessing that's probably being invested into a certain situation where it's not being reciprocated. And then you're consumed about what ifs on the other side and why is it not happening? If I keep doing this, what's going to happen? So on.
That's right. And very often these what ifs aren't even true. Like we create them in our mind. Like we're really good at
Yeah.
creating a story around that. What if, myself as a public speaker, for example, I'm often going on stages with 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people. Imagine if I thought every time I'm about to go on stage, oh, what if I trip over on the way to, the microphone, or what if I forget my lines, or what if somebody asks me a question, or what, and I can't answer it, and what if, what if, what if, what if?
Hmm.
Like, imagine I thought of that every single time that I go on stage, and it doesn't serve me well. What that does then, that what if thought will actually start creating an emotion. That emotion being fear. Now I'm scared to go on stage, and
Hmm.
that starts to create anxiety, and then that starts affecting me physiologically and psychologically. My shoulders are tight, my chest is palpitating, my heart's beating. So it's not going to serve me well. You can actually change that just by your thought patterns. So if I think, instead of saying what if plus a negative, what if I trip over, or what if I forget my lines, if I say what if plus a positive, what if this is going to be the best talk I've ever done? What if this is going to be like just an amazing, I get a standing ovation and everybody loves it and they walk away with some really good tools. So then I change that thought pattern to a positive thought pattern. And instead of feeling fear, I trust now that I've got all the resources. I trust that I know my lines. I trust that I have the knowledge and skills to deliver this talk. And then instead of feeding the anxiety, now I'm feeding excitement. Now I'm actually excited about going on stage. So then I've changed the physiology and psychology of my body. And by the way, the same feelings that you have with anxiety are very similar to the same feelings you have with excitement in the body. You're still going through a bit of a fight and flight response. You still got adrenaline and cortisol, but the only difference is the mindset. The mind is saying, this is going to be the best thing ever. This is so you've changed it to a positive psychology.
Yeah, so you're looking forward to it rather than dreading it.
Exactly, exactly, and all of that's just happened in the mind.
Yep.
Imagine a marathon runner or a sprinter thinking that every time he runs he's not going to win, or he's going to lose, or he's not going to do well, or he's going to trip over. So all of it is a thought pattern. So we need to turn towards our thoughts and reframe our thoughts positively.
Yeah. And does that sort of then become the basis of what you mentioned earlier, where during your tour on the bike, you knew you could get through a situation, so you had confidence in yourself to handle it? And is that sort of like what that leads to?
I think trust is the word. I think, trusting that I really had the resources inside of me. So before I even headed out on my bike, before I did the trip itself, actually, so there was actually 5 of us that planned this cycling adventure around the planet. We wanted to predominantly do it off-road. And we got all the maps out. Back in the day there was the paper maps, and we got the Michelin maps out. We had Africa and India and Asia and China. And we were so excited. I was like, this is exciting. But as we kept planning the route, and we wanted to do it predominantly off-road, every single one of my friends backed out on me. They actually bailed. They said, "No, this is dangerous. It's too." They got into the what ifs. What if I get sick? What if I catch whatever malaria? What if I get whatever? So they bailed on me, and so I was put in a situation. Was like, okay, I either believe in myself and go for it and go solo, or I actually join them and actually bail. So I chose to go solo, and I'm so glad I did, because it became my trip and became my journey. So going back to that word trust, so what I did before I before I went out on the trip itself, is I actually trained myself to get stronger in different situations, in different weather conditions. So I'd get on my bike and I'd load up my tent and everything, and I'd go head out for training rides. And sometimes it would be through the desert of, the outback of South Australia, or, the middle of Australia, or sometimes it'd be in a storm, or sometimes it'd be in conditions, and I'd purposefully put myself in different weather conditions. And I'll just share a quick stories with you here. So one particular weather that I was looking at, I wanted to test out my new equipment. I had all this brand new equipment. I wanted to test it out, and there was a storm forecast for the area. I thought, cool, let's go out and test out my stuff in this storm. And I was really excited about a brand new lightweight tent. It turned out to be more than a storm. It turned out to be a cyclone. It turned out to be, so I was in a situation where I was riding my bike and it was freezing cold. I was having cyclonic winds coming towards me. My fingers were turning blue. I was becoming hypothermic. I was in a really bad situation. And then I actually got hit by a tree. There was big, massive gum trees being uprooted in the area, and a tree hit my bike and me, and it damaged my tent, it damaged my cook set, it damaged my pannier on the back of my bike, and it also injured my leg. So I couldn't ride anymore. And I looked around the area, and it was like, there's just nowhere that I can shelter externally. There's nothing. My tent's damaged. There's nowhere I can shelter. And it was absolutely pelting rain. Like I said, my fingers were turning blue. My lips were turning blue, getting into sub-zero temperatures. And I, in that moment, thought, well, there's nowhere to actually shelter externally. The only thing I can do is go within. And I've been practicing meditation for many years, and I actually practice internal martial arts, Tai Chi and Qigong and Kung Fu. And I remember a breathing technique that my Tai Chi master taught me that can actually raise your core temperature from the inside. So I said, I'm going to give that a try. So I tried that, breathing technique, and I did notice that after some time, I was starting to feel warmer again. I got one of those emergency blankets, I wrapped it around me, and to cut a long story short, I actually meditated for 12 hours from dusk all the way through to dawn, and I was in the middle of a storm, in the middle of nowhere, far away from any help and support. Trees were coming down around me. It was pelting down with rain, but you know what? I felt totally safe, totally secure, totally warm, no problem at all. I managed to make it through to the morning, and then I fixed up my bike, and then I went on my journey. So that incident that happened to me, it was quite life-threatening, but that gave me the trust. Going back to the word trust, that gave me the trust and the belief to know no matter what happens to me on this trip, I can always find those resources inside of me. Always. They're always there. You just need to tap into them. And that's where, like I said, I was in all sorts of situations, machine guns in my ribs and all sorts of crazy things. But I always believed I had the trust. So, and everybody listening today, you've all got it inside of you. Sometimes we don't know it until we actually need it, and then we can tap into that. So doing that self-development work is always worthwhile.
Yes, you need to believe that you can persevere through a situation, because if you hadn't had that experience, would you still have gone on the journey knowing that you could do it? Because like that was like the tester.
That was a tester, yeah.
It turned into the tester for the actual trip, effectively.
It was. I didn't mean it to be. I didn't mean it.
Yeah, it just happened.
It just happened because I was caught in this crazy storm. Yes, I still would have gone on the trip because at the time I was just, looking for a bit more in life, and I wanted to, travel and see the world. And most of my journey was living with Indigenous people. So I was always staying with Indigenous cultures. I learnt a lot from that, but also I was staying in monasteries and temples and churches and whatever religious practices were going on in that area. So I was really keen to learn and understand more about that. So, and that sort of is the premise of the work that I do now. So now all those lessons that I learned on the road about resilience, about trust, about belief, about rising above adversity, about going through challenging situations, I share those stories and those experiences in the boardrooms, on stage, because everybody has those capabilities inside of us. But very often when we're bombarded by external stimuli, we forget about that. And we don't.
Like it gets awash in the noise.
That's right. That's right. And I have noticed with the advent of AI, and this is one negative thing that has come out of it, is a lot of people don't go into deeper critical thinking anymore. As soon as you hit a bit of a roadblock, I notice I have teenage daughters and they use, some tools, ChatGPT and things for school. And I notice every time they get stuck on a problem or something that's, they're doing some homework, first thing they do, jump on ChatGPT and ask that. Instead of going into their own critical thinking and their own deep thinking, I try to encourage them as much as possible to do that. But I have noticed that when you get to a sticky point, I'll just ask ChatGPT or I'll ask whatever it is, because we don't do that deeper seeking and deeper, looking inside. Because, when I'm coaching somebody one-on-one, I actually look for those sticky points. I actually, we'll be having a conversation and I'll be asking questions. And when someone gets stuck and when someone goes silent, I know they're about to come out with something that's like awesome. When the next thing that comes out of their mouth is going to be a revelation. It's going to be like a breakthrough. It's going to be, but you have to get to those stuck points. You have to get to those sticky points. And usually I look for about 2 or 3 sticky points. And by the time you got to the third sticky point and they've talked about it and they've resolved it, usually they've actually resolved their own problem.
Yeah, okay. They're no longer surface level thinking. It's not
That's right.
The autopilot just coming out.
Yep, exactly. And it's their own critical thinking. They're digging deeper for an answer. And if I just keep asking why, and just keep probing, if they get to 3 sticky points, usually that session is quite successful because they've actually resolved their own problem. But with the advent of AI, I'll just ask ChatGPT. They can solve my problem.
It's a tool that's too good at certain times. I think that's why, because that's the easy way out.
That's right.
In that situation.
Which is useful.
Yeah, it's useful, definitely. I use it nonstop all day long. I probably got 40 ChatGPT tabs open now. But I'm using it as a brainstorming tool to help me think. But I've spent hours and days thinking of things beforehand.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to work through details to understand how to deliver it. Because I spend a lot of time thinking of solutions and I consume a lot of information. So I'm thinking about how to put all this together and how do I actually apply it? Help me work on a plan, because I know these 10 things. This is roughly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Just give me steps to follow for the first one, and then I'll do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just need a prompt, right? You just need the first step to get the initiation. Exactly. I agree. And then you go into your own thought processes and you go into your own seeking and searching. So I hope we never lose that. I really do. I hope we don't lose that sort of ability. I have a friend of mine who says, he works for Microsoft and has Oracle and all those sort of companies, and over the years, and he says, it's really great, all this AI. It helps us to, get rid of the stuff we don't need to think about anymore, so we can think about the higher things. Think about, which I agree to some extent, but we still need to think. Like if we stop thinking, and problem solving ourselves, what happens to that ability to do so? We lose the capacity. It's the old saying of if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
So we still need to think, and we still need to use our prefrontal cortex to problem solve and plan and decision make and all those sort of things, and logically, analytically think. Don't rely on other tools to do it all for you.
The way I used to describe it when it first came out was I had less like brain damage at the end of the day. So
Yeah,
when you're in deep thought all days, I'll be designing systems or solutions. And when you're focusing very intently for 4 or 5 hours, then you have workshops, you're just like, you're fried. That's the best way I can explain it. Like your brain
yeah,
just doesn't work. I stopped having that every day.
yeah,
And now it's
yeah.
transitioned into I'm getting fried from just trying to learn too much.
That's right. Is when does it stop? And like you, I'm not sure how you keep up with it. Like there must be
Uh, I,
you go to bed at night, you wake up in the morning, and there's a new thing, right?
yeah, I can tell you my process. So I will listen to podcasts off YouTube or a normal podcast at any opportunity. So
Yeah,
doing something in breakfast, earbuds in, and I'm listening to some news that's come out overnight because there's always something new. So this morning there was a video on one of the guys was touting that the AI has become self-aware because during a benchmark test, it figured out that it was being benchmarked through the type of question that was asked. Then it went to find out on the internet what questions there were and to answer the question. It's not self-aware. It's just got tools to do web search. So I have to understand that. And then I'll be working all day. My son will have soccer after. If there's no one to talk to, I'll listen again. Otherwise, that'll be that. And then I'll start working again at night, thinking about what I'm doing, and then start again.
yes,
So it's just
yeah.
nonstop. I consume 6 to 10 hours of content a week just trying to understand what's happening with AI.
Yeah, yeah, because the market changes all the
Yeah.
time, doesn't it? There's
And
new.
then my creation version of that is then I'll record a video at the end of the week and I'll share it with the team. This is everything I learned over the past week from all those videos.
Great, yeah,
So at least there's a little bit back, and then that helps me like solidify what I've thought about.
yeah, to process it and to
Yeah.
think about it.
And
That's
then in
great.
between, when I'm not listening, I'm thinking about either what I'm doing at work, what I'm going to do tonight, what I learned, or just trying to put it together. So that doesn't
Yeah,
stop.
yeah, that's good, and it doesn't stop exactly. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. What do you do to switch off?
I enjoy doing that, so that I don't
Yeah,
find that as much of a problem. But that's where my brain goes, is in the thinking and all that stuff, rather than what if. I'm not
yes,
thinking on every day, what if AI comes and takes our jobs? I'm a
no,
software developer. If AI is going to write all the code, what are we going to do? I'm not thinking
yeah,
about that every day. I'm thinking, all right, I know I can do this now, so I'm trying to come up with a solution or working on things that will help us ride this wave, not
yes,
thinking about what the negatives are of the wave.
yeah, because you're on task, right? That's
I'm
why.
trying, yeah, that's
Yeah,
me focusing now and saying, all right, I know I've always been confident saying, all right, even if I walk into a meeting, I didn't know what I was talking about, I can talk about it with confidence, then go back and figure it out.
yeah,
So I'll know
yeah.
we can deliver. So that's the
Yeah.
trusting myself to being able to deliver it.
Yeah, and that gives you a reward. You
Yeah.
feel good about that, so that's your joy, and you love doing it, which makes sense. But there also needs to be some sort of off button eventually.
Yeah.
And yeah, there
And
must be.
that's, you spend time with the kids, spend time with
Yeah,
your wife, and then
exactly.
I try not to think about too much. Or we have the little nightcap at night, we'll sit down and we'll watch a TV show. And
Yeah,
then
no.
that's try to focus on that.
Yeah, because we're not machines. We can't just constantly
No.
be digest. There's
Yeah.
many clients that I work with. I work with a lot of doctors and surgeons and a whole range of clients, and they work 80-hour weeks. Some of them they're crazy, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And many of them actually can't go to sleep at night unless they're actually stimulated by something. So they have to listen to a podcast or have some white noise, because soon as they start thinking and they start processing the day, not all of them like what they see or
Okay.
hear, so they have to distract themselves. And it's a big challenge of the world now, because we're constantly plugged in. We're constantly on call. We've got telephones and devices
It's
plugged
nonstop.
in all around, non-stop. Exactly. So we all got mechanisms to switch on. We can all switch on for work,
Yeah.
but we also need mechanisms to switch off.
Yeah. I
And
think for me, the mechanism that helps is probably music.
yeah,
I
music's
can listen
great.
to a podcast while I'm driving as well. And then I'm learning just about random stuff, nothing to do with AI. But then recently I've probably just been listening to more music because then it's an off
Yeah,
moment.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So whatever it is, listening to music, playing music, or just going for a walk, we all need off, because we cannot be on. And the reason I say that is because I see it in the work that I do. When people do reach out to me, they're usually in the orange red zone. They're exhausted, they're fatigued, because you can do it when you're younger. You've got the energy, you've got the
Yep.
vitality, you've got the capacity, but eventually it starts wearing you out over time.
Yeah.
And so we need mechanisms to be both on and off. It's basically what's called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is when you're on, your fight and flight response, you're thinking, you're planning, your brain's in what's called beta mode. That's great. You need that to function during your day. But we also need to give the nervous system a bit of a rest and digest in the parasympathetic nervous system. So so switching off, listening to music, doing meditation, going for a gentle walk, or just sitting out on a bench outside and doing nothing for 5 minutes. We need that balance. Otherwise, the end result is burnout and fatigue and exhaustion.
Yeah, you can't be at 100% nonstop. Like recently, I've been staying up at night to work on AI stuff. That's not part of the day job. So that's the experimenting and other stuff, because otherwise it takes time away from the stuff that actually generates the revenue.
Yes.
And doing that, in my head, I've said, all right, it's 3 or 4 nights max a week,
Yeah.
because you can't do it every night. So I need more sleep on some nights just to make it even.
That's right.
I can function pretty well on 6 hours, but some nights you need more. And then I've got a rule where it's all right, 3 or 4 days, and then I'm done.
Yeah. So you have to put some boundaries in that. Like sometimes you need to perform, sometimes you need to do more. Like a doctor, sometimes they have a 2-hour operation that turns into a 6-hour operation. But then they have to bounce back from that on the other end, where they have to then have rest that next day if they can. And it becomes dangerous when you start doing it, nonstop, and then you just can't switch off. And then it's a bit like those, those NutriBullets. So those NutriBullets, so you put all your smoothie in there. So that NutriBullet is designed to oscillate at a very high frequency, to mash up all that, fruit and things that you're putting in your smoothie. Same as the brain, same as it's what's called the amygdala. The amygdala, the stress center, that operates at a high frequency. But what happens if you leave the NutriBullet on for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? It burns out, right? Same as our brain. It's not designed to be on all the time. It's not. You cannot, without consequence. So, lacking sleep. Yesterday I just did a seminar on sleep, and I asked the question in the room actually, and who gets by on 5 or 6 hours sleep, I asked, and 90% of the room put their hand up. And for me, the key word is get by. Do you want to just get by, or do you want to like thrive? And when I'm coaching athletes, for example, they are awesome at sleep. They get 8 hours, sometimes 8.5, 9 hours, because they know they need to fuel their performance the next day. And that's the first thing you get right. Typically, if you get your sleep right, everything else will fall into place. Because it doesn't sound like much. I'll get 6 hours here, there, but it has a cumulative effect over time, and it starts compounding. And then your body starts making less repairs. Your immune system gets compromised. Your brain's always thinking. So optimal sleep is 7 to 8 hours. So reclaim that whenever you can.
Okay. Yeah, you can't. I know you can't make up for lost sleep. That's the thing. It's what everyone thinks. Yeah, I'll sleep in on the weekend and it'll fix the rest of the week, but it doesn't work like that. For me, it's just as long as I know there's all right a boundary on like 11:30 or 12, all right, and then I'll go to bed and I'll get up at 6. So I know there's at least a good 6-hour block in there, and then other nights I'll be in bed at 10.
Yeah, perfect.
And then that makes it up. So I've set boundaries for myself because I know that I can't do it 7 days a week. Something has to give somewhere. You can't be on all the time, like you said.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'll catch up on the weekend and whatever," but you don't. You don't catch up.
There's never a catch
Yeah,
up.
exactly. And the work that I do, my big message is how can you incorporate recovery in your day every day? So you come to work, you do your work for a few hours, you have a rest, a little break, you do it, and you just keep doing that through the week. So that way you get to the end of the week and you're not tired. You get to the end of the day and you're not tired. So how can you incorporate recovery, short little bursts? So the research says that we can only really optimally work at our best cognitively, our brain function, for periods of around 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay, I thought it was less than that. From when I remember studying at exams and reading something, I thought it was like 20 to 30
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can do changes every 20 minutes. There's what's called the Pomodoro technique, where you actually change pace every 20 minutes. But typically, if you're planning, problem solving, decision making, you're cognitively using the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain. 90 minutes to 2 hours, you start fatiguing after that period. So you start making mistakes or making errors, or you just can't get the answer. So you're better off stopping for 2 minutes or 5 minutes to make your next 2 hours more constructive.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, especially with workshops, because after 2 hours your brain starts drifting.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. I stop thinking about what we're talking about, or if there's not enough thought put in, or you're not absorbing it as much.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I run workshops all the time. I run half day trainings, and
Yep.
you have to change pace every 20 minutes. You're right. You have to
Hmm.
do something every 20 minutes or change activity. But after the 90-minute mark, you have to have a break. You have
Yep.
to go have a toilet break because otherwise your brain doesn't take in more information. The other research says that, you know, we take in or we're only present for 47% of the time. So our
Okay.
brain drifts off 47% of the time. So even in this 1 hour sort of podcast we're here or
Yeah.
whatever here, chances are our brain's thinking about other things, or
Oh
you
yeah,
might be
there's been thoughts coming in. The challenge is to try and focus on what you're saying so I can have a conversation with you.
exactly. So it takes training to actually be present. It takes training to stay present. You know, what I always say, it comes up in every seminar and workshop that I do. What I always say, I should create a slide for this because it always pops up,
Yeah.
is the best compliment you could ever give somebody is your full attention. But it actually takes training and work to give your full attention. Very often you're listening to somebody, but you're not there. Or
Hmm.
very often, you know, you're talking and there's just a disconnect. So it actually takes work to give your full attention. If you have kids, you mentioned you have kids, they know when you're not present. You know, they
Yeah.
know when you're drifting off, or your wife, or you're having dinner and you're not really there. They know.
Hmm.
And especially in this bombarded external stimuli world, our brain's drifting off all the time. So it actually takes training. It takes work to do that. And that's why I train myself every single day. I meditate every day, twice a day, morning and afternoon, plus through the day to train my attention muscle to stay present. So when I
Yeah.
am running a workshop or when I am doing a podcast or when I am coaching, I am 100% there, fully present.
Yeah, and that's important because that's how you get the best out of what you're doing and the other person as well.
Totally, yeah. With your
Yeah.
clients, with everybody, like you got to be fully present. But it actually takes work. It really does. Like we're living in an attention deficit. You know, these days we're constantly being hijacked and pulled in all sorts of directions. And you know, I was working with a young boy recently. I was doing a session for him. He's ADHD boy, great kid. And when I went to do the session with him, he was not plugged into one device. He had like cords coming out of everywhere. Like
It's
he had
plugged
a
into the matrix.
it was like, oh my God, he had an iPad and a telephone. He had, you know, different headphones going on. He was listening to a soundtrack, but he was playing a game at the same time. I was like, oh my God. Like it took me at least 20 minutes to sort of like unplug him, you know, and
Yep.
sort of get him back to like present time, and then we could do some work. But that's the world we're living in today. Like we're just constantly plugged in, and you know,
Yeah.
devices are tethered to us, and
Hmm.
especially the children.
Yeah. It's a challenge to manage for sure.
Totally.
But
Yeah, I have teenage kids. I know, like it's, and I manage it, and they're pretty aware. Like obviously,
mhm,
with parents like us, we're sort of a bit more, you know, switched on to that in some way. But of course, they get into that world,
of
and
course.
before you
And that's
know
where
it,
the world's going. So you can't not do it either. It's
that's
about
right.
balance.
It's about boundaries, setting
Yeah.
yourself boundaries, and doing that. And that's the digital world we live in, which is
Yeah.
great. And it's the best thing that ever happened to us, and it's the worst thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah. So just before we wrap up, I'm just conscious of the
Sure.
time. For those that are looking and like probably the big concern in the space I'm in is like what AI is going to do to everyone. Like, what are some things you can suggest to people to help manage the fears they have with that's being drummed up by AI in the news and everyone?
Yeah, it's definitely don't get caught up with it. Like going back to what you said before, you know, focus on the things you can control. You know, focus on that sort of inside of the circle, and manage that as best as possible. And anything that's sort of on the outside of the circle of the uncontrollables, don't even waste a single neuron on it. Don't go there, because obviously with the news, it's always sensationalism, and they want to, you know, do that fear mongering, and
Hmm.
also make up your own mind. Like really, like I said before, turn towards your thoughts. So you know, maybe one last thing I'll leave your listeners with is to think about this. So anytime you're having a fearful thought or a negative thought, or yeah, something that's really consuming your mind and it's not serving you well, turn towards that thought and ask it these two simple questions. And the first question is it true? Yeah, so if you're starting to go down that what if rabbit warren, oh, what if this happens, and what if AI does this, and what if, ask it, is it true? If it's true, you can do something about it. You can take some control, and you can put some control measures in or mitigate risk or whatever it is. But very often, and I know this in the work that I do, 99% of the time, it's not true. It's not. Like for me, going back to that example of I'm going to trip over on the way on stage, is that true? No, it's not true. I'm going to forget my lines. Is that true? No.
Yep.
So very often we feed it and we believe it. So number one is it true? That'll catch like 90% plus of negative, unuseful thoughts. The second question to ask it is then, is it useful? Is it useful me consuming my mind with all this stuff? Is it useful me worrying about this? Is it useful for me thinking about I'm going to trip over on the way to stage? Is it useful? Chances are it's not. So sort of become your own sort of analyst in a way, your own little like scientist. Like, is it true? Is it useful? If it's not, just let it go. Don't spend one single neuron of activity on it. It's not worth it.
And you focus on what you can control at the
Yeah,
end of
that's
the day.
right. And turn towards that and do, and like you said before, I like what you said before, take action and implementation and like move forward with your own stuff. And when you're focusing on your own stuff and you're really focused on your work, that stuff just fades away. It's
Yeah,
not
you don't
even
have
there.
time for it.
No, there's no time for it. Exactly. Like it's usually the people that are, sort of doom scrolling and whatever. They're not focused on what they're doing.
Yeah.
So going back to focus on what you are doing, and then that stuff is just there's no time for it. Don't waste a single
Yeah.
ounce of energy on
You've
it.
only got X amount of time, minutes, hours in a day where you can decide what you're going to do. When you're at work, you don't decide. You're working. When you're home, you're home. Like, so you have to choose how you're going to divvy up that time. And
That's
that's
right.
you have to allocate it
It's
the way you need. You may need, all right,
a choice.
15 minutes of doom scrolling. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Don't let it
yeah.
be the 100% of all the time you have.
That's right. It's a choice, and and
Yeah.
and, and making more choices in the way, making more valuable choices, and turning towards it. But the first step is awareness. You can't change what you don't notice.
Yep.
So you don't notice I've just spent 4 hours on the telephone. How did that happen? Just I was at the gym yesterday, just in doing a workout, and I noticed I looked around, and everybody on those machines in between sets was on the scrolling. Like they do a set of something,
Yeah.
and then they jump on the telephone, and a lot of them didn't notice that they were there for like 15 minutes.
Oh,
Like
right, okay.
yeah,
Just
like they
holding up
don't realize.
holding up the bench or the equipment.
Totally, like they're just not aware. They don't
Yeah.
notice it because they jump into some YouTube clip or some silly thing on TikTok, and they're in there. They don't notice it. So you can't change what you don't notice. So
Yep.
again, for your listeners, the first step is self-awareness, like noticing it. I noticed that I spend a lot of time consuming and I'm not creating. So going back to that, hopefully that's helpful.
Yep. I think it definitely is, and there's been a lot of points you've raised in this that I think that'll help someone listening out there. If not, I take a few things away myself anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
Well, Melo, if anyone wants to find out more about you or get in touch, how can they do that?
Probably the best point of call is my website. My website is melocalaco, melocalaRco.com, but I'm sure you probably put that in the
Yeah, we'll add all
show
that to the
notes.
show
Yeah.
notes.
And then obviously the book's always a good resource, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance. There's lots of cool tips and tricks in there to help and support you. So yeah, happy to support wherever I can.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we'll put all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really insightful chat, and I didn't know where we were going to go, but I think it's ended up being a really good one.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Take care.
You too.